Welcome to CBN NewsWatch for Wednesday, September 22nd, 2021. I'm Mark Martin. President Joe Biden led today's virtual pandemic summit for the United Nations. We will bring you the latest. Plus, Christians facing severe persecution.
One victim who was arrested for the possession of a Bible was detained in solitary confinement, starved, and beaten with a metal rod.
See how a brutal communist government targets and tortures believers. And
do not show up at school a week from Monday, you will be charged with contempt of court, meaning you will be incarcerated.
He's a believer. He loves his family, loves his wife, and he really, really loves God.
The God's Not Dead series continues, and it's on the way to theaters.
The story of God's Not Dead with the people ties both directly and indirectly to the events of the previous film.
We bring you a preview of the movie that touches on some hot-button issues facing Christians in America today. All this and more are next.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
President Biden has promised to vaccinate 70% of the world population by this time next year. The president's announcement coincides with a new commitment to purchase an additional 500 million doses of Pfizer's COVID vaccine for developing countries. The pledge nearly doubles an earlier promise, bringing the total U.S. commitment to 1.1 billion doses to be shared overseas. Biden is calling on well-off nations to do their part to get the virus under control. His announcement during the UN's virtual COVID summit comes as world leaders criticize wealthy nations for considering boosters while so many poor countries wait for their first dose.
To beat the pandemic here, we need to beat it everywhere. And I'm keeping the promise that America will become the arsenal of vaccines, as we were the arsenal for democracy during World War II.
The new batch of Pfizer vaccines will be exported to poorer countries starting in January. President Biden also spoke at the United Nations summit yesterday. He addressed issues ranging from the U.S. pullout from Afghanistan to the ongoing pandemic. As CBN News senior Washington correspondent Tara Mergener reports, some critics thought the president overlooked some crucial threats.
World leaders gathered at the UN for the first time in 2 years. Despite mounting crises facing the Biden administration, the president insisting America is back. The UN Secretary General kicking off the meeting with an ominous message.
We are on the edge of an abyss and moving in the wrong direction.
Although Biden used his first major UN address to reassure the world American leadership is strong while promising relentless diplomacy.
As the United States seeks to rally the world to action, we will lead not just with the example of our power, but God willing with the power of our example.
The president hopes to repair relationships with allies after high-profile issues, ranging from Afghanistan and a U.S. drone strike that killed civilians to out-of-control illegal crossings at the U.S.-Mexico border to the COVID pandemic.
To fight this pandemic, we need a collective act of science and political will. We need to act now to get shots in arms as fast as possible.
Critics charge Biden has been out of sync with close allies, including France, angry it was left out of plans to equip Australia with nuclear-powered submarines. During the speech, he did not mention China by name, but declared the U.S. is not seeking a new Cold War.
The United States is ready to work with any nation that steps up and pursues peaceful resolution.
He also wants immediate action on climate change.
Scientists and experts are telling us that we're fast approaching a point of no return in a literal sense.
Some global leaders remain skeptical about America's promises, calling the U.S. disloyal. While some critics say the speech was better than expected, it's unclear if Biden's words will win the world's confidence.
We're saying we're going to use relentless diplomacy and not relentless war. Does that invite China to say, well, let's talk about Taiwan a little bit? Does it invite other provocative moves by Russia towards Ukraine and some of its near neighbors if they think the United States is not willing to use its military might?
And I don't think anything in the speech today convinced them that the Biden administration is any more prepared or capable than they thought that they might be. And if anything, it might have raised some more questions about the United States.
The Biden administration also announced plans to ease foreign travel restrictions to the U.S. beginning in November. The U.S. has largely restricted travel by non-U.S. citizens coming from Europe since the start of the pandemic, an issue that had become a point of contention in transatlantic relations. In Washington, I'm Tara Mergener, CBN News.
Democrats in the House passed a bill that raises the debt ceiling and keeps the government funded with no Republican votes. Democrats say the measure is necessary to avoid a government shutdown, but the bill faces an uphill battle in the Senate. Republicans won't go along with increasing the debt because Democrats can pass it by themselves, and the GOP doesn't want to sign off on the Democrats' huge spending plans. House Democrats also blocked $1 billion in funding for Israel's Iron Dome anti-missile system in the vote to extend the debt limit and keep the government funded. Earlier this year, the Iron Dome successfully shot down hundreds of missiles fired into Israel by Hamas. Former Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, told CBN News the vote is a troubling sign of the direction of the Democratic Party.
I'm worried. I'm worried that those voices become louder. We know it's not the majority, not in the Congress, not in the Democratic Party, but they are vocal. We expect our allies, and we have a lot of allies in the Congress, to speak against those voices.
Democrat House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer says he plans to fully fund the Iron Dome in another bill. The Biden administration faces political criticism over the border crisis and mass deportations in Del Rio, Texas. But White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki defends the immigration policy and says the situation is challenging.
It's devastating to watch this footage. I think it's important, though, for people to also know that what we're trying to do is also protect people. One, we've been conveying that this is not the time to come. We have been implementing Title 42. That's not just about people in the United States. That's also about protecting migrants who would come in mass groups and be in mass groups.
Around 8,000 migrants, many Haitian, are still awaiting processing. Thousands of others have been sent back to their home countries. According to the Associated Press, U.S. officials say many of the Haitian migrants are being released into the United States. This undercuts the administration's public statements that Haitians who enter the country face expulsion. The Biden administration says they believe they will have all the remaining migrants processed by the end of the week. We want to give you a quick look now at a few other stories making headlines at this hour. The International Mission Board announced a policy that requires field personnel and staff members to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19. This to address the challenges of overseas life and travel requirements for personnel and staff members who travel overseas. The annual See You at the Pole event is going on today. It's a prayer rally where students meet before school around the flagpole to lift up their friends, families, teachers, and their nation to God. Since 1990, the student-led event has spread to more than 64 nations with more than 1 million participants. Christian Solidarity Worldwide is asking people around the world to join a campaign to win the release of Cuban pastor Lorenzo Rosales Fajardo. Cuban authorities arrested Fajardo following peaceful protest across the island nation. You can read more about this story by going to CBNNews.com. Coming up, how the United States is seen at the United Nations and around the world under the Biden administration and its foreign policy. President Biden promised to take on COVID-19, climate change, and human rights in his speech to the United Nations Tuesday, and he emphasized diplomacy and international cooperation in the wake of the U.S. pullout from Afghanistan.
We've ended 20 years of conflict in Afghanistan, and as we close this period of relentless war, we're opening a new era of relentless diplomacy.
But Biden avoided the harsh criticism from U.S. allies following his chaotic pullout from Afghanistan and diplomatic blow-ups with France and other European allies. Our senior international correspondent Gary Lane joins us now with a closer look at the Biden foreign policy and our relationship with the United Nations and our allies. Welcome, Gary.
Glad to be with you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks for your help this morning.
Sure.
First of all, let's talk about, are most European nations unhappy with the United States right now, and specifically the Biden administration? And are we going to see that play out at the UN?
Well, I don't know how that's going to be played out at the UN, but at least the NATO members aren't happy with Joe Biden because of Afghanistan. Remember, they fought side by side with American troops there, and then when it came time for withdrawal, they begged President Biden to extend his deadline, and he did not do that. They wanted to get their property out of Afghanistan. They wanted to evacuate their citizens, and Joe Biden left them hanging. So there's still a lot of hard feelings over that one, Mark. Also, the recent French nuclear deal that went south when the United States decided to trade with Australia.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Why do you think the United States decided to make this nuclear submarine deal with Australia? And would you say this is a reflection of the concern related to China?
Yes, it is concern related to China because China has been very aggressive in recent days. They've been making test flights over Taiwan. They've been threatening the U.S. over Taiwan. In addition to that, they're threatening U.S. allies in the South China Sea. Their Navy is on the move, making very aggressive moves in the South China Sea, building islands and then attacking other ships. So this was a concern for that. But here's the rub on this, Mark. It's a $100 billion deal for 8 nuclear submarines, nuclear-powered submarines with Australia. But the earliest of these will go into operation 2014 at the earliest, maybe as late as 2060. Or 2040, I'm sorry, maybe as late as 2060. So we're 20, 30, 40 years down the road here. That will do little to protect the South China Sea and Australia and the region from aggressive China.
And let's talk about that rub against France. What happened there? I mean, obviously the French very upset, pulling their ambassador from the U.S. Talk about that, and what can the U.S. do to repair that relationship?
Well, that has never happened in the history of the United States. Of course, the French helped us win our Revolutionary War against the British. I don't know if we could have done it without them. Definitely the war would have been prolonged without the French. And here Joe Biden does this deal behind the backs of the French. And the French, it meant big bucks for them. And it's going to take a long time to heal the wounds from that one. Of course, the Afghanistan deal or withdrawal, the president met with Boris Johnson and the British at the UN. He's trying to heal that relationship. But the French, that's going to take a lot longer to heal that one.
How is the U.S. being perceived at the United Nations and the Biden administration specifically versus the Trump administration? And would you say that the U.S. is losing relevance around the world, or is it the other way around?
No, I think we're losing relevance. And I think, you know, Joe Biden is putting an emphasis on multilateralism, but there's a difference between emphasizing multilateralism and being weak. You can act multilaterally, but still show strength and leadership. And that's what I think most of the people in the UN are concerned about. Also, there was no mention of China's human rights. I don't even think he mentioned China at all. He said Xinjiang province when he referred to a human rights issue there, but he didn't elaborate on that. And basically, China's the elephant in the room with their violations of human rights. And there was no mention at all about China. Trump did that when he gave his speech. You know, some people say, ooh, he's going after China, he's going after other countries, he shouldn't be doing that at the UN. But where else are you going to do it? You have a global platform there. And President Biden, instead of using a global platform that he has, a soapbox, basically was using a step stool.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. Thanks for breaking it down for us. We appreciate it, as always. Well, coming up, still ahead, a look at one of the biggest threats to the church and the world today and how difficult this dictator nation makes life for Christians. It's no secret the North Korean regime has no tolerance for religion, but a new report details the horrific punishments Christians face if caught practicing their faith. CBN's Jennifer Wishon has the troubling details.
The report details how the Workers' Party of Korea, led by Kim Jong-un, targets and tortures Christians, then goes to great lengths to conceal its crimes.
The report spells out terror committed by the regime, designed to remove all traces of Christianity, and reveals the campaign to exterminate all Christian adherents and institutions has been brutally effective. North Korea's secret police, the Ministry of State Security, are incentivized with promotions when they apprehend Christians and other believers.
Those charged with Christianity often face summary executions or are forced to live out the rest of their lives inside political prisoner camps.
In-jae Wang interviews North Korean defectors who have experienced or have firsthand knowledge of abuse.
One victim, who was arrested for the possession of a Bible, was detained in solitary confinement starved, and beaten with a metal rod used for cleaning rifles.
Christians are the most persecuted because of the faith's association with the U.S. and Europe. Undercover government spies search for any evidence of worship, making it impossible for Korean Christians to congregate without being reported.
All the Christians that we interviewed for this report told us that they dared not practice their religion together with any other people.
Even children are taught from a young age to be suspicious of Christianity.
Schools, young children are taught that Christian missionaries are spies of the countries who seek opportunities to invade North Korea. And they're shown graphic images of missionaries sucking the blood of children to show how malicious they are. And they're taken to state-run exhibition halls where religious adherents are presented as murderers, spies, and where Bibles are displayed as trophies taken from enemies of the state.
The big question, what can be done to deter these atrocities in a country so closed off from the world? Some experts say targeted sanctions are effective because Kim Jong-un cares what the world thinks of his regime, a fact demonstrated by show churches set up by the government to feign tolerance to the outside world and efforts to cover up persecution.
There's a reason that they go to incredible lengths to conceal the political prison camps. There's a reason they have built show churches and show temples and have actors pretend to be congregations for foreign visitors in Pyongyang. There's a reason they respond so aggressively to Human Rights Council resolutions that condemn their human rights record more broadly. And there's a reason why they push back so hard against targeted human rights sanctions.
Meanwhile, North Korean Christians and others continue to suffer and inspire.
You know, it says something about the power of faith, that in the face of that kind of just egregious, ongoing, systematic persecution of people for their religious beliefs, people still choose to believe.
Commissioner Davies says the world should know the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom is painstakingly documenting these abuses, and the persecuted are not forgotten. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
Coming up, the hit Christian movie series God's Not Dead is back briefly in theaters. It hits home with its title, God's Not Dead, We the People, and takes a cinematic look at something at the core of American values, our freedoms. Welcome back to Newswatch. It's one of the most popular Christian movie series of all time, and it's back with the latest installment, God's Not Dead, We the People. It touches on some of the hot-button issues facing Christians in America today. Here's a first look with Ephraim Graham in Studio 5.
America is a country so blessed with prosperity. It only makes sense that much will be asked of her in return. To whom much is given, much will be required.
The story of God's Not Dead, We the People ties both directly and indirectly to the events of the previous film. We have recurring characters. You'll see some familiar faces from the first film and the second film and the third film. So it was great fun to be able to direct some of the returning cast that played their same roles and see how they've grown. And so the series has matured. Those characters, as a result, have also matured, and myself included.
I'm here to review your homeschooling environment.
The challenges that Rebecca faces are not so much personal with her family, but more with this idea that someone is going to say, you can't live the life that you want to live, and we're going to take this ability to educate your children the way that you feel led to. We're going to take that away from you and force you to do things our way. And that's a big challenge to overcome, but it's amazing to see how she approaches that in the film.
And your lesson plan is the Bible?
Well, for theology, I'd be hard-pressed to find a more appropriate book.
My character is me. I'm just bringing myself to this one, and I personally want to fight for God.
Every family in the co-op has just received a court summons. How is that possible?
They're willing to fight for it. They're willing to lose everything for it. I mean, I'm talking about losing their careers, losing their house, and everything they ever worked for.
If your children do not show up at school a week from Monday, you will be charged with contempt of court, meaning you will be incarcerated.
He's a believer. He loves his family, he loves his wife, and he really, really loves God. I think we need to have more roles like this, positive leading roles, and someone who believes in family and God and country.
Now there's an effort in the way to mandate universal educational guidelines.
All of a sudden, they're going to Washington to plead their case, and our freedoms can easily be stripped away from us if we don't stand up.
Homeschooling is like a weed to these folks, and they just want to yank it out.
Which is why I think we should fight this.
Just want to make sure you understand.
In the midst of these movies, that the characters hopefully are organic, that people can relate to, and some of the issues that, you know, are relevant in their lives, in each and every one of our lives in different ways. The hope is that it encourages people in their faith.
Your beliefs do not exempt you from the law, Mr. McKinnon.
America was founded on these principles, and if we just throw them away...
I think we're done here. A congressperson that is on their side, I think it's important and unique into itself. They insist on trampling believers' rights. Well, sir, they are in for a fight. I feel confident in this movie, because it's very timely, probably overdue. If they can find some solace to know that if you choose to fight, maybe this is a pretext or a manual to help you understand how you can.
A government of the people, by the people, for the people.
Looks powerful. God's Not Dead, We the People will be in theaters for only a few days, October 4th through the 6th. And you can catch Studio 5 with our Ephraim Graham tonight at 8:30 Eastern on the CBN News Channel, or you can see it on the CBN News app. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories you've seen. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com or talk to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day.